I'll drink to that.
Yeah,
What
and
what are you drinking, by the way? Let's
I
hear.
have a bottle of Line 39 Cabernet 2016.
Okay, all right.
So I'm a cab
I,
guy.
I've got a French Bordeaux that a friend of mine just dropped off at the house, and we already annihilated that bottle. This is the end of it. So
Yeah,
here's a proper cheers. Dink.
think there you go.
Listeners, viewers, please feel free to join in as well with your drink of choice.
Exactly. So I outside of just doing this, I really have been looking forward to talking to you because you're on the other side of the world. You get to see all the craziness that's been happening. So these shootings, this is nuts. And let me tell you, people are going crazy over here. Crazy.
Now, I intentionally, and you'll probably won't like this, but I intentionally kind of I did 50-50 on the news this week. I really didn't go full bore into the news because I want to kind of approach it with a fresh mind on the whole thing. And I mean, here's what's playing out over here in Europe is that you have two shootings.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, one occurred in, was it El Paso?
Yep. One was in El Paso and the other one was in Dayton.
And the other one is in Dayton, Ohio. And the the thing that is really perplexing just on the outside looking in is that you have essentially two shooters with entirely opposite ideologies, and I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure how to interpret that. I don't think there's necessarily a message aside from it's of course anything like this is tragic, but I'm not. I don't know really how to look at that. The whole thing is that there seems to be a set mindset when something like this occurs, and unfortunately, it occurs all too often to the point where there is a mindset
Mm-hmm.
where somebody will say, particularly online, they'll say, "Oh, well, we send our thoughts and prayers out to the victims,"
Yeah.
and somebody else will say, "Well, you can't say thoughts and prayers because thoughts and prayers don't do anything." Well, okay, well. And then those left of center will say, well, we need to go on ahead and have serious gun reform, and it'll go back and forth to where there's almost always already a preset debate going on in regards to these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's the takeaway that we're seeing over here. Obviously, there's also the thing in regards to no matter what Trump says on this, it's certainly, how shall we say, he doesn't carry the I know this is an understatement, but he doesn't carry the gravitas to a tragedy the way that previous presidents have.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he's pretty tone deaf when it comes to this.
yeah, uh, um, and I mean, uh, say what you will about George W. Bush. I know a lot of he's a polarizing figure, even several years after he's left office. But he was somebody who when a tragedy came, he met with everybody, he shook everybody's hand, he visited everybody, things like that.
Well,
Obama.
I think there's predictability between all of the presidents that when something bad happened like that, they tended to, there was this process. Get out there in front of the crowd. We're handling this. They get together to talk to the appropriate people, find out what's going on, what decisions have to be made, what do I have to tell the American people? Okay, let's execute on these things. Do we need funding? I mean, there's this process that you feel like would happen, and
Okay.
I'm not sure how they were seeing this in Europe, but when the first shooting happened, that was one thing. When the
Right.
second shooting happened, then people started saying we have a crisis going on here, because it wasn't, the media focused on those two shootings, but there were other things going on in the same weekend that was risen to the what people would think would be the normal level. So, for example, in Chicago, some guy killed 4 or 5 people with a knife,
Okay.
somehow, and so there was this. Hey, what's going on here? There's an uptick in this particular small amount of days. Is this a coincidence or not? So that started kind of surfacing a little bit, and then of course now that we're away from it ever so slightly, it's the media was focused on these two things, and all this other stuff is going on. And why is it that we're complaining about these two shootings when 50 people die a day of cancer, or just stuff like that. I mean, all this stuff is starting to come out, and I think if there was any opportunity for a president to get up and try to calm people down and say, okay, we do need to look into what's going on here, and then let's talk about action. So I think what's happening is that we have a president who didn't do that. He waited a full day. He went to El Paso, and there's video of him talking about how many people were in his crowd for his inauguration. He was critical of Beto O'Rourke. And Beto O'Rourke, he's from El Paso. I mean, you could see that he was struggling with it, and he and they finally started asking him some pointed questions, and he's like, yeah, I think Trump's a racist. So, and instead of, Trump, saying, well, people have their opinion. This is a very, emotional time. People are going to say things they may not necessarily mean, whatever. He starts firing back, and he gets on Twitter, and then he goes to El Paso because they say, we don't want you here. But so then he goes there. I mean, it's that kind of things that I think are incendiary. And what I have noticed, and I don't know if you noticed that over there or not, because I know that there's right-wing stuff happening specifically in Germany. But these people who have been laying low for years, these conspiracy theorists who would kind of keep to themselves or congregate in their own little group, they are coming out of the woodwork and just blasting everybody with everything. So,
Well, okay, a couple of different things here, and I mean, to give you an idea, and I may be comparing apples to oranges here, but you have things like this that happen in Germany as well. It's not to the magnitude that we saw in El Paso or Dayton, but you bring up Chicago as well and things like that. I mean, there are tragedies that if you look at them, or if the German people look at them, they seem to feel like, okay, this is a problem. The most recent was where you had 2 incidences within a very short period of time. I don't think it made play over in the U.S. media as much, but there was one right here in Stuttgart where a guy took out a samurai sword in broad daylight and stabbed a guy to death.
really?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Wow.
If you go and look at it, you can find it. It's easily found. There's an even more horrifying story of a man who the local rail system. I think this was a little bit farther north. It may have been over in Frankfurt or something like that, where a man pushed a mother and a son into an oncoming train. The mother was able to roll out of the way. The son was not able to.
Wow.
And the thing that connects both of these stories together is that both of the perpetrators come from a foreign background. So what happens is that you have conspiracy or what have you. You have a more of a vocal group saying, well, this is an immigration issue. We have to go on ahead and pay more attention to this and things like that. Where the one issue with the train, if I recall the story correctly, the person was said to have some pretty clear mental issues, and the other one, the one with the samurai sword, the two parties knew each other, and there was some animosity towards the two. But people want to be able to take a story and drop that story down into their set of beliefs.
Yes.
And
Yes.
The easiest thing is if you could take the story, and the worst thing in the United States is there's almost a anticipation when there is a something like a mass shooting or something where there's an unfortunate high body count. You're waiting for that person who's committed that horrible act to be identified.
Yeah.
And then when that person is identified and that person is found to be a white male, they say, aha, see, this is our story. We can go on ahead and run all these. Or that person is said to have immigrated from a country that is on one of Trump's lists as far as countries that we should go on ahead and be more cautious of. Then the people on the right can say, aha, we were right the whole time. And there's that anticipation, and it's and
it just has to be it just has to be a little nugget of information. Join us on Polus, where we work to find common ground through discourse. We would talk about all things, political or otherwise. This is an open forum for discussion about all aspects of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.